Well, I've watched Svali's video again, and once upon a time, in common with the vast majority of people, I would probably have written her off as insane. Now, she strikes me as one of the most sane people on earth, and it answers so many of my own questions. And some of these I've undoubtedly covered in videos that I've made in the last 24 hours. But this time I did write down notes, points. She said that the children were made to feel they were all special. And I can remember my shock when I got to school, aged 5, and discovered that I wasn't special. And in fact, that as a girl I was looked down upon and considered inferior to boys. Now, my father had always told me that girls were better than boys. Of course, at that age, I didn't associate that with sex. I didn't associate that with a paedophile's sexual preference for little girls rather than little boys. I actually believed that little girls were better than little boys, which was probably the beginning of my feminism, arriving in school, heathen stroke pagan stroke Luciferian father, and being told by a bunch of Christians, that God was male, Jesus was male, everything and everyone who counted for anything was male. I objected to it right from the word go, aged 5. And of course, by the age of 8, I've said that all the boys in the class began to bully me, which they did. But I was fighting them. And I've said this before as well, not physically, but verbally. I was saying, no, you're not more intelligent than girls. Look at you, you can barely read. Which was true, I'm sorry to say. I could read when I was 4 before I got to school, and they were 8, and they couldn't. And it was, oh God, the boredom when they were reading aloud from a book that I'd already read from cover to cover, and they were like on page 3 or 4. And I was thinking, they're not more intelligent than the girls. No way! And of course, not only did I argue that with them, I argued with the teacher. And strange synchronicity here. My father used to talk about an occasion when he was a boy, and he got 100% in science. And he was marked down to, 98 or 99%. And when he asked the teacher why, the teacher said, because nobody's perfect. Well, that year with that teacher, I got 100% in English, and I was top of the class. And this was in an era when prizes were routinely given for that kind of thing. And I didn't get one from that teacher, with whom I'd argued. All that strengthened my feminism and turned me more and more against anything male-dominated, including and especially religion. So my father's training worked, but perhaps not quite in the way that he had wanted, because he certainly didn't want a daughter who was feminist. And on that same subject, it's honestly only occurred to me in the last 24 hours, just little quizzes on Facebook. Did you pass the 11 plus? Yes, I passed it when I was 10 and 3 months. Well, in that era normally, perhaps not now, I don't know, because no kind of academic competition is encouraged now. It seems to be, well, it's not encouraged at all, just the opposite. Sporting competition is clearly encouraged, but academic competition isn't. But the normal route for a 10-year-old who passed the 11 plus would have been to be fast-tracked into a class where she would not sit staring out the window bored to tears, which is basically what I did throughout the senior school. As a girl, I didn't even make it to grammar school. So the 11 plus was completely pointless. Very, very few girls made it to grammar school in the county of Hampshire in 1965. So quite a lot actually that came up for me there. I've been over the denied food and water bit, as Svali was. And of course that happened when I was 10, and I had arsenic poisoning. But even though at 10 I did not consciously realise that my parents were responsible for the fact that I had not had food or very much water for a fortnight, I think I did learn something from it, which was that I could be allowed to die at any time. And I was depressed pretty much from then on, certainly throughout the senior school, partly for the reasons I've just given, that I expected to go to grammar school and didn't, and my education, far from being fast-tracked, was slowed down. But this is where I think my father's Nazism diverged, perhaps, from the objectives of the Illuminati. My father's Nazi training said very clearly that females should not be educated. And of course, learning not to want, as she said, learning not to want anything, not to recognise your bodily needs. Yes, that worked extremely well. And still does. And the bit about if you leave, you're likely to have an auto accident, an accident in a car. Whoa. What, like Princess Diana? Or lesser people? No, not lesser people. Lesser known people. Unknown people. My half sister Karen Ann, Amber Mattingly, who, in whatever way they were involved in this circle, were involved in this circle. Did they try to leave? I don't know. I just don't know, because I didn't know either of them. I never met either of them. I didn't even know Amber Mattingly existed until I was informed of her existence, because she had been raped by the same man who had raped me. Unexpected visitors likely to get killed. That rang a bell or two. But having said that, I had something very specific in mind when she said that, and it's just gone. No, I'll come back to that one. With so many notes. And they own the newspapers. Well, we know that, don't we? We all know that now. I've talked a lot about Richard Desmond in particular, who owns, who's a huge media mogul, and who, in my opinion, is controlling our government. Well, he and the EU, of course. And talking of the EU, boy, haven't the Illuminati made a good start there. I think that's probably the first continent, we are probably the first continent, where they have tried to merge us all, different nations, different languages, different cultures, into one homogeneous blob. And it isn't working. Well, that's okay, because that creates chaos. On the one hand, we are flooded, for example, with a religion which was alien, certainly to the British Isles, i.e. Islam. When I was a kid, England certainly was a Christian country. Wales was and still is a Christian country, as far as I can see. I think the same applies to Scotland, Ireland. To be flooded with Islam is, for my age group, a terrible shock. And on the one hand, they're very deliberately flooding us with this religion, and on the other, we have the newspapers telling us in no uncertain terms that we should hate and fear this religion. And certainly in my case, I don't need the newspapers to tell me that, because I've read the Quran. And I know what happened in Iran back in 1979. So I don't need to be told by the newspapers to fear Islam. I already do. Not a phobia, because phobia is an irrational fear. I think it's extremely irrational to fear what is done to women and children under that religion. So what's the plan? Is the plan a civil war? Is the plan that at some point we will all rise up and pop off the Muslims? What is going to be the religion of this new world order? What Catholicism? Because we are also being flooded with Catholics, are we not, from Eastern Europe? And actually, the Svali says this is controlled from the Vatican. I don't know. How would that go down with Judaism? Because, after all, Jews consider themselves the chosen people. So I can see a little problem here with which religion is going to dominate the world, especially with the rise of atheism. It's just as well that they have the patience to plan ahead for hundreds of years, because I think they might come across a stumbling block or two, and already have. I'll leave that one as well for now. Never get out alive, yeah. I think I've already covered that. Auto accidents, etc., or possible drownings, for example, or suffocations, or some of the things I have come across. I've also come across, of course, 2 stabbings to death. Perhaps those 2 were intended to send out warnings. Pretty clear warnings, so that everyone could be certain that they were murders. And don't F around with us, mate. You know what's going to happen. The whole of society is infiltrated by them. Well, we know that too, don't we? We know that too. Those of us who've been gang stalked know that already. And we know that some people who can be persuaded to do it, not knowing what they're doing. They can be quite simply persuaded that somebody is worthy of hatred and contempt and punishment, and they go ahead and they do that. They don't have to be actively in the Illuminati. They can just be persuaded that certain people are not worthy. We already know as well that they're into any and every illegal activity, don't we? That some are trained to be prostitutes, some of the programmed children are trained to be prostitutes, some are trained to be assassins, and this, that, and the other. Or for the military. I might question whether or not there's any difference, actually, between a civilian assassin and the military. Not a popular viewpoint. Really interested in the part about being a courier, because I had speculated more than once that on the magic bus between England and La Tour de Paix in Switzerland, perhaps I was being used as a courier. I had already speculated about that, and now that possibility comes back to haunt me again. I just covered the military, which you mentioned. Very, very interested in what she said about the short-acting drug given to frightened children, followed by hypnosis, or accompanied by hypnosis, because I believe that is what happened to me many, many, many times in my childhood. Although I do wonder if my father sort of formed his own split off from it all, because the Illuminati side, as I've said, would have been my mother's side, and he was a Nazi. And I have said I think that they perhaps expected those 2 to gel better than they did. far better than they did. Because the objectives were not quite the same, although the EU undoubtedly was a Nazi objective, and I want out. And it's also clearly an Illuminati objective as part of the New World Order. One continent has already been done, and that's Europe. The deliberate fragmentation of personalities, yes, I can see that. I've often thought that I did, although I can't be certain of that, of course. I can be certain of long gaps in my memory during and after traumas, for example. And even a period of my daughter's schooling, a 3-year period of her schooling that I'd completely and utterly forgotten had happened until she reminded me. Arranged marriages I did cover on another video. Well, that definitely went wrong. I do believe that it was arranged for my mother and my father to meet and to get together. And this is where I think they'd underestimated the Nazi training, because my father was taught not to believe in marriage and not to have any responsibility for the offspring that he produced. He was also taught polygamy. That was part of his training. So immediately you have a problem. Not to mention the fact that my mother, I am quite certain, did not want to be with him. Not after sending a photograph, with her black eye, and or trying to send photographs to her family. If they reach their destinations, how do I have them now? Very interested in the Christian schools run by the Illuminati. As Svali said, not all Christian schools are run by the Illuminati. Some are. I wonder if Bishop Cotton's school in Bangalore was one of them. That's where they sent my father. And of course, both my mother and her brother were sent to Christian schools, boarding schools. I wonder what their agenda was. The fake reunion followed by the removal of the children I've already covered. I'm still not quite certain why I would have been punished in '93 by the removal of my younger daughter. Because that was a few years too late, surely, and they'd already killed my mother. Wasn't that enough? What had I done in the recent past, I asked myself, to bring that on? I think perhaps my father saw one last chance to get at my younger daughter and indoctrinate her, among other things. Maybe he really did know he had terminal cancer. I don't know. I am never going to know about that one, because none of the people who lived with or near him knew he had terminal cancer. But my brother says he did know. My father did know. And I'm not even certain he died in '94, so that's another, God knows. Or perhaps the devil knows. And as for the rest, austerity, she talked about, financial, something that would make the Great Depression look like a, children's party. We have austerity throughout Europe. Chaos. Well, we have chaos throughout Europe. Absolute chaos. Because of multiculturalism. It's worked better as chaos in this continent because of the number of countries and the number of languages and the number of cultures. If it's attempted in America, everyone speaks the same language. That isn't going to be a problem. Ditto Australia. And of course it is being attempted in America and Australia. Not sure it's worked quite as well yet as in Europe. And then she talks about the supernatural. Well, I have my own experiences of the supernatural, but I'll save that for another